Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leon Hartwell. Welcome to our 22nd LSE IDEAS Russia-Ukraine Dialogue. We are part funded by PeaceRep, an international research project led by the University of Edinburgh Law School, which delivers research and tracks data on conflict and its resolution. Russia has worked hard to undermine Euro-Atlantic security. Today, it is crystal clear that the Kremlin is set on preventing Europe from becoming whole, free, and at peace. In particular, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has had major impact on the Black Sea region. The question is, in what way? The Black Sea region is bounded by Bulgaria, Georgia, Romania, Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine. And those who have been observing the region for some time will know that Russia's destabilizing actions in the Black Sea region predates the February escalation of Putin's aggression in Ukraine. Most notably, the 2008 Russia-Georgia war marked a key moment by Moscow in terms of its actions in the Black Sea to undermine transatlantic relations. Russia's Black Sea fleet has served to project power into the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. The Black Sea also served as a primary base for deploying units to Syria, and it has been instrumental in serving Russia's aggression in Ukraine. The Black Sea Fleet remains a significant force with approximately 30 to 40 frontline warships. And for the benefit of our audience, it's worth noting that the Turkish Straits are the only waterways in and out of the Black Sea. Importantly, NATO member state Turkey decided to close the Turkish Straits to all warships, as opposed to merely restricting access to the two adversaries in the Russia-Ukraine war, which would have been more in line with the Montreux Convention. In effect, some would argue that Turkey's decision limits the ability of NATO to challenge Russia's preeminence in the Black Sea region. To help us unpack these complicated issues, I'd like to welcome three very distinguished panelists. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Andriy Zagorodnyuk, Ukraine's former Minister of Defense and currently Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Welcome.
Thank you.
Secondly, I'd like to welcome Tania Latici, Policy Officer in the Office of the Managing Director for Common Security and Defense Policy at the European External Action Service and a Fellow at SIPA, Egmont Institute, and NATO 2030 Young Leaders. Thirdly, and last but not least, I'd like to welcome Tornike Parulava, Director of the Department of Security Policy and Euro-Atlantic Integration at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia. Prior to his role, he was the Deputy Head of Mission of Georgia to NATO. Welcome to all three of you. Andriy, I'm going to turn to you first. If you could kick off this conversation for us, please. Starting in 2014 until Russia's full-scale military invasion of February 2022, how has Black Sea security changed for Ukraine? Thank you, Andriy.
Well, let's start with the fact that Russia had always had, at least under Putin's regime, always had the strategic goal of controlling Black Sea. So basically, it was returning to the idea of the Soviet Union control of the northern part of the Black Sea, and for them it was critical that they reestablish that control over the period of time. So that's one fact. Secondly, we obviously, with the occupation of Crimea in 2014, they established a massive control over the whole big chunk of the Black Sea, and also with the so-called Kerch Strait is basically a connection between the Crimea and the European part of Russia, which is also entry to the Sea of Azov, which is obviously considered as a part of the Black Sea region. So with that, they control the Sea of Azov. And it's important to know that in Sea of Azov, between Ukraine and Russia, there's been a treaty signed in 2003 regulating the Sea of Azov as an internal sea. So essentially, it doesn't have a 12-mile zone. So essentially, Russian warships could come as close as basically a shoreline to the Ukrainian territory. In 2018, they closed the Kerch Strait completely. So essentially, Ukrainian government ships couldn't enter. And with the occupation of Crimea and occupation of the large part of the Black Sea, they also impacted economic situation. So they, for example, they occupied the natural gas deposits which Ukraine owned, and then some transport routes, ports, agricultural installations, and so on, and infrastructure, etc. So the security of the whole region changed completely with the with 2014 annexation, and then situation was getting only worse. At the same time, Russia constantly played the sort of victim play, the self-victimization, basically constantly explaining to the rest of the world that it feels vulnerable, it feels threatened by NATO, and so on and so on. I have to remind that NATO strategy for 2010, despite the fact that NATO borders Black Sea, basically Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey obviously are part of NATO. NATO in the 2010 NATO strategy doesn't mention Black Sea even once. So NATO always overlooked Black Sea, and some countries never had a strategy about the Black Sea. They always thought it was something on the outskirts, and basically they would return to that point, to that area later, but never did. So the first time Black Sea actually appeared in NATO strategy was last year, and essentially we now have to realize a totally different reality after the February 2024, but a lot of these indicators of that Russia wanted to escalate situation in the Black Sea happened years before that, and unfortunately we see a lack of strategic approach of many countries to the region, despite the fact that there's been countless papers published over this period of time, countless articles, conferences. There's been Black Sea working groups among think tanks like government employees and so on. So it's been constantly in the discussion among the expert communities, political authorities, and but unfortunately there hasn't been any specific steps made like to prevent the escalation, and many of the negative scenarios have been realized, unfortunately, since then.
Thank you, Andriy. That was a great intro into our discussion. And since you mentioned earlier that this idea of the Black Sea region was absent in 2010 in terms of NATO's strategic concept, I'm gonna ask a question to Tania, both in terms of EU strategic compass and NATO strategic concept, both of which now makes reference to Black Sea security. So Tania, what is the strategic importance of the Black Sea for the EU and NATO, and what steps are being taken at present to focus on that? Thank you.
Sure, thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me. Well, first of all, I think I'm not sure how much the audience is knowledgeable about what a strategic compass is. I dream about it almost every night because it dominates my daily work, as does the strategic concept in a different way. But they're basically large strategic documents that guide both NATO with the strategic concept as well as the EU when it comes to security and defense policy. For the EU, obviously, this is a bit of a newer process. I have the strategic compass right here next to me. It's the first kind of strategy of its kind for the EU. And I want to emphasize this at the beginning to convey a bit its political importance, because this strategy was adopted by 27 foreign ministers and 27 defense ministers, which means it has political ownership. So whatever we put in there, including on the Black Sea, and I'm getting to that now, is politically owned, which means we have quite valuable finger pointing prerogatives from the EU institution or the diplomatic service where I work to hold the member states accountable to that. Now, what's important also to remember, because you asked me about both the EU and NATO, is that if you put the strategic compass and the strategic concept next to each other, both of them have a common threat assessment and a common vision. There are many positive overlaps, which is absolutely essential, of course, to have this common vision of what is European security, what are the threats that we are facing, and then what do we need to do collectively to face those is really, really important. And this applies 100% to the Black Sea. In both documents, the Black Sea is recognized as a region of strategic importance. It's about time. as a Romanian, I'm saying this as well. So I'm also glad, as Andriy is, that this is now seen much more clearly. I think, and this is a personal note, that the region has been quite neglected for some time for different political reasons as well. I think we should also be a bit self-critical, and that it's also the responsibility of those countries to put the Black Sea on the agenda, and we could have done better at that. We could have been better at that, I think. But when it comes to NATO on the military side of things, obviously NATO's prerogative is collective defense and deterrence in the Euro-Atlantic area. So NATO's position, I think, especially since the war, has been demonstrating quite strong resolve, I think, when it comes to the Black Sea. I mean, NATO reinforced its enhanced forward presence with additional battle groups in Romania and Bulgaria. In Romania, also since 2017, NATO has deployed a tailored forward presence. They're not the most attractive names to remember, but what can we do? It's the military after all. But these are focused very much on building defense capabilities in the Black Sea. So things are happening there, and the political and military recognition, I think, of the Black Sea can also be seen now much more clearly in a more practical perspective. When it comes to the EU, on which I'm much more competent, I think, to speak about, our vision and our approach is really 100%, I think, in sync with NATO, and our efforts and the different competences that the EU and NATO have on each hand, basically, fit very well together. They're really mutually reinforcing, and this is how we need to look at them. The EU's approach to the Black Sea, I think, for the moment especially, is seen particularly through the lens of resilience, right? Resilience, which is by default a very comprehensive umbrella type of concept, which includes, classical maritime security aspects, cyber, hybrid, societal resilience, energy security, disinformation, democratic resilience. All of these different elements put together, I think, is how the EU as such sees the Black Sea. And you can have two specific perspectives here. If you look on the one hand at capabilities, the EU has very concrete policies when it comes to improving military mobility, which is essential for the defense of Europe, but also of the Black Sea. And this is very much of interest to NATO, to protecting sea lines of communication, to protecting freedom of navigation, naval exercises, these sort of things. That's one perspective. The second perspective is partnerships, strengthening partnerships with coastal states. And I have a feeling that this will be a big element in our conversation today. Coastal states, Georgia, of course, obviously Ukraine, that goes without saying, but also in the entire Black Sea region, counting Moldova as well, whose strategic position, I think, is now in everyone's face. So I think these two perspectives and the broader umbrella of resilience should be kept in mind when trying to understand a bit the EU's position vis-a-vis the Black Sea and how that fits into NATO's strategy and vice versa. Let me stop there for now.
Thank you, Tania. And we can definitely expand on some of the holistic issues there and approach towards the Black Sea region. And I'd love to talk about the partnerships also later on. First, let's turn to Tornike. I don't know if you can, if you're able to be on camera, if possible. I think we've lost you. And if you could unmute yourself. Tornike, Georgia was victim to Russian aggression on a variety of occasions, including most notably in 2008. Now, that significantly changed the dynamics in the Black Sea, as, if I'm not mistaken, 2/3 of Georgia's Black Sea coastline was cut off by Russia and placed under the control of Abkhazia. Can you shed some light on that? Thank you. Tornike, can you hear us again? I hope you heard my question. Tornike?
I did hear your question. I'm sorry, I'm having a difficulty with the connection. I switched to my phone.
No problem. We can hear you well.
Very good. Could you see me as well?
Yes, we can see you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation for the topic. Could not be more relevant than today. Let me respond to your question, but let me start a bit further. Well, first of all, I would like to agree with the first speaker, our Ukrainian friend, who who described the situation with regard to Black Sea in our recent history, how it was seen from the West. Unfortunately, I only can agree with the minister when he is saying that it was neglected. The importance of the Black Sea was unfortunately neglected for a very long time. It was seen as a remote place where some things happened, some events taking place, but with a little relevance to European and Euro-Atlantic security. Unfortunately, this was the case, and we have to realize that it was all taking place in the background of Georgia, Azerbaijan, some other countries trying to implement some very important regional projects. The objective of those projects was to bring Central Asian gas and oil and Caspian Sea oil to European markets. And we implemented number of important projects. But in parallel, Russia was building Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and other significant projects, which clearly contradicted the interests of the projects which we were implementing. Unfortunately, at that time, international community and the West in general failed to realize that reliance on Russian energy sources was related to certain risks. The potential of the Trans-Caucasian and energy corridor is immense, and as we see today, it is the only alternative to diversify the gas supply of Europe. But I think we have lost lots of important possibilities there already. There is still time to catch up, but we have to realize that we made significant mistakes. The war in our region did not start on 24th of February. At the beginning of 19th, just few months after Georgia regained independence, within the first year and a half of our independence, we fought 2 wars with Russia over Georgian territories, and we've lost both of them. As a result of those 2 wars, we had almost 500,000 people either internally displaced or as refugees. Another important milestone was 2008, when Russia openly used a military aggression against a sovereign state. Basically, it was the first time since Afghanistan when Russia used its armed forces outside its territory so openly, so clearly, violated the territorial integrity of neighboring country with little or no consequences whatsoever. And then we had 2014. 2014 again, Russia effectively used its green man tactics, annexed Crimea, effectively destabilized eastern Ukraine, and again, very little response, at least harm to Russian interests was very limited. So I think where we ended up on 24th of February was only logical continuation. It was a continuation of the appeasement policy towards Russia, which today we can clearly say that it failed. The tendency which we observe today is very promising. We hope that full-scale invasion of Ukraine will put our region into a different context. And we see some signs of this context already. As previous speakers spoke also about interests, we have more clear vision from the EU side. We have to admit that NATO's approach towards the region started to change since 2014. And since 2014, we have significant increase of NATO's attention to the region. But unfortunately, even in that circumstances, the individual position of member states dominated discussion rather than the threat perception in the region. But I think the dramatic events in Ukraine are changing this reality. I think today nobody questions that without secure Black Sea, it will be impossible to achieve Euro-Atlantic security. Black Sea region is an integral part of Euro-Atlantic space. We have to invest into the security of the Black Sea. We have to be creative and flexible, because the situation which we have on the Black Sea is following. We have 3 NATO member states and 2 close partners, 2 aspirant countries who aspire to join the alliance. And we have to be flexible, we have to be creative, as I said. We have to look at the context rather than format simply, and we have to take our steps based on common threat perception. And I think today everybody agrees with regard when it comes to threat perception in our region. I will stop there with your permission and looking forward to other questions.
Thank you, Tornike, for contextualizing the situation right now and kind of mapping out how Russian aggression, of course, goes back a lot further. And there were many wake-up calls along the way, that were ignored, of course, by NATO. Let's turn again to Andriy. We kind of paused a little bit on everything up to February 2022. So let's focus on how Ukraine's perspective on Black Sea security shifted since then. And of course, since then, Russia dominated by and large the northern part of the Black Sea, and it has used its naval ships to launch major strikes against or across Ukraine, with everything from drones to Harpoon missiles. You have had to respond quite creatively and asymmetrically to Russia. What lessons have you learned? Thank you, Andriy.
Thank you. Okay, so of course, since first day of the war, Black Sea become like one of the critical theaters. Russia tried to occupy Black Sea immediately from the day one. We all know probably about the audience about the Snake Island case, which was occupied on the first day. And generally speaking, for Russians, Black Sea was the area where which they wanted to completely control, cut Ukraine from the ability to use it either militarily or economically. And of course, there has been amphibious operations plans in the regions of Odessa, Mykolaiv, and some other areas. And essentially, Black Sea was supposed to be one of the key directions of the attack to Ukraine. So that was the plan. It didn't work out exactly for different reasons. One of the reasons was that we could arrange to sort of deny Russian access directly to our shores, so they couldn't land in Odessa, they couldn't land in Mykolaiv. And that substantially changed their plans. So we know about at least several attempts to approach Odessa shores, Odessa coastline, and every time, for various reasons, they turned around because it was too risky. So they couldn't plan that operation properly. At the same time, of course, we regained the control over the Snake Island. We destroyed several ships. Most notably known was Moskva, a cruiser flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. I believe that the Turkish decision to close the Bosphorus Strait was crucial in this case, because I don't think that we would expect any engagement of the NATO ships in the region at that point of time. Frankly speaking, I don't think we can expect any NATO direct engagement in this war, since absolutely different political reasons. We may agree with them, we may disagree, but that is currently a reality. At the same time, Russia tried to pull all the available ships from other fleets to the Black Sea as well, and the closure of the straits helped to avoid that. So we have a very large number of ships, but it's still limited. It's still finite, and we can work with this. So our strategic goal is very simple. We need to destroy Russian Black Sea fleet. We're working on that. I don't think we'll be able to destroy all of the ships, but we will be able to create a substantial damage to it, at least to the ships which are capable of carrying the long-range missiles, which they use weekly, including today, for example, and including yesterday. We had an airstrike of almost 70 missiles to Ukraine. Massive power cuts around the country, including Kiev, etc., and some of those missiles were sent from Black Sea. So of course they now keep away from the coast for those reasons, and away from the range of the Harpoon missiles, away from the range of Neptune missile, which we have. But as you probably could see from the in TV and so on, we're working on some autonomous systems, some drones, some other systems, and I believe that the further damages to the Black Sea is just a matter of time. It is critical to, so basically that's like operational snapshot, very, very simple one. From strategic perspective, we need to also understand that this whole thing becomes a massive precedent of how this war ends, and how basically this battle for the Black Sea ends will have a huge influence on the maritime operations around the world, and basically maritime security around the world, and general strategic security around the world. Because the reason Putin started that war, I mean the one which kind of a full scale from to February 24th, was because the previous wars in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Donbass, annexation and occupation of Crimea, occupation of Black Sea, those were the wars where the costs were less than benefits. So basically he could justify the cost of some sanctions, some kind of isolation, some sort of disruptions of economical, political activity, but all those costs were very relative, had a lot of different loopholes, and basically he could afford them, the Russian government could afford them, and essentially move on. So, and that's why right now, of course, since they had this massive strategic goal of dominating in the Black Sea region, dominating across the former Soviet Union space, intimidating world order based on international law, intimidating the Western and European democracies, and so on and so on. So all these kind of strategic, long-term strategic goals which Russia has, and they still keep them. It is important that Russia fails in this war, and so it's not like a negotiated settlement out, somehow compromise, etc., etc. Because when they passed so many red lines, in this war, like you know them from the news, it is now very critical that the precedent which was set in the Black Sea region is the one which shows that such an approach leads only to the ultimate outright failure, not to some gains, not to some sort of negotiated settlement or some kind of a quid pro quo or whatever. So we need to, win-win or whatever. So we need to be very clear on that. And that's why we as Ukraine, have only one option, is to regain control over our parts of the Black Sea, destroy Russian presence there, and keep on fighting with the war. Thank you.
Thank you, Andriy. That's very clear. And it seems like you and your Georgian colleague, of course, also agree on this issue of appeasement with regards to Russia. The Baltic states, who each of which were also part of the Soviet Union, they were all also very adamant on this point, that there should not be negotiations at this point. Tania, let's turn to you, and here I'd like to speak to the Romanian in you, as that's part of your heritage. What is Romania's strategic role in the Black Sea, in terms of Black Sea security? And given ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine, how will Romania's role change in the coming months and years? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Just to say that I think everyone is really on the same page here. From the EU side, on whose behalf I'm allowed in a way to speak, appeasement is certainly not an option. The fact that Putin must lose this war is very clear and is unequivocal and not up for negotiation. This is very clear and has been made clear from my mortal level to a very, very high political level, and it will stay the same. And this brings me to Romania, because Romania, I think, is really one of the countries that has been very vocal and had a very important role in defining this strong position. I think we're seeing Romania now slowly taking up the mantle of a regional security player and a regional security leader, which it has the prerogatives to do that. It has the size, it has the strategic location, it has the population, the capabilities, more and more the economic strength, the right friends, and the right membership. So this is quite a rich checklist, I would say. I think we've seen, and I have the privilege of seeing a lot of the behind the scenes when it comes to our response to the war and support to Ukraine. I really seen Russia, God forbid, Romania play a crucial role in overall EU and NATO support to Ukraine. But I think it often does so fairly under the radar, if I may say so. So let me give a few examples. Romania was absolutely crucial in establishing the currently existing solidarity lanes, which ensure that Ukrainian trade and economy can continue given the blockades. Romania has now increased its defense budget to 2.5% of GDP. It's a really strong contributor to military support to Ukraine. It's hosting millions of Ukrainian refugees. And as an insider's view, I see always very proudly, if I can even say so, Romania being a very vocal supporter, not just now, but already for years, of Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, again, even before the war, when it comes to everything from any foreign policy and defense discussion to, of course, very vocally supporting offering candidate status for EU accession, which is a huge milestone if you think about it. But also when it comes to allocating funds, whether for military support, whether for supporting democracy and the rule of law, etc. So Romania was always one of these countries that kept this issue very high on the political agenda. It was instrumental to do so. And I think playing this role in the different political spheres, important political spheres in which it is present, whether in the European Union, whether in NATO or the UN. I'm trying to slow down my rhythm now because I saw a question asking us to slow down because we speak too fast. So Romania's role in these fora and keeping this very high on the agenda will prove to be essential, especially as the hardship also in Europe now continues economically. When we look at energy, this is very much testing government stability and resilience. So this will be very, very important to keep it high on the agenda. And to maybe close on this point, I think if I look at it a bit more strategically, I think Romania is now very well positioned, along with other countries as well, but I'm referring only to Romania since that's what you asked me about. I think it is in a good position to leverage its strategic geography and it's the checklist, right, that I provided internally then in these different fora to keep the Black Sea on the agenda, to make sure that our policies are shaped in a way that we are on the right side of history and in a way that we are very much supportive of the also regional security architecture. And also I would hope would be very, very proactive in proposing active actions and engagement in these different countries. So I'd say stay tuned.
Thank you, Tania. Yeah, and I've spent some time in Romania, of course, during post-February, and I can, of course, attest to the increased NATO presence in Romania. Romania just being a spectacular host, not only of NATO troops, but also, of course, of Ukrainian refugees affected by this conflict. Let's turn again to Tornike. Let's talk about Georgia again. Can you briefly characterize Georgia's position with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war? And also, given that the ongoing war in Ukraine is another pivotal moment to rethink Georgia's relations with the transatlantic community and Ukraine, and in the context of Black Sea security, what can we expect of your strategic posture going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Before answering your question directly, let me give you some insight about the situation in Georgia and perception of the war. As I have said before, since the collapse of Soviet Union, we fought altogether 3 wars with Russia. You know, Russia very effectively managed to persuade the international community that it was a moderator or a peacekeeper in early wars in early 90s. But you know, I was a kid, but I do remember the scene on the TV when Georgian air defense shot down a Russian jet above Sukhumi, the capital of the Georgian region of Abkhazia. The jet was down, the pilot ejected, and at that time, President of Georgia, Shevardnadze, climbed the mountainous area with a group of journalists, and he knocked the stick on a red star on the side of the plane, you know, underlining that it's a Russian plane. You know, separatists could use artillery pieces, but using a modern jet plane is not that easy, you understand. So it was flown by Russian. The very next day, we had a Russian TV and Russian defense ministry saying that it was Georgians painted their own planes with Russian signs and then bombed their own city. So hybrid warfare and disinformation is not a new thing in my country. So giving that context, you understand how it felt when the war started in Ukraine. It was especially at the beginning. It was almost like it was happening here. If you remember, Tbilisi was one of the first places, if not the first one, where we had one of the largest demonstrations in support of Ukraine right at the beginning of the war. If you go out on the streets of Tbilisi, most of the time you see Ukrainian flags, much more visible than Georgian flags. We've been supporting all international formats with regard to Ukraine, whether it's in the UN, OSCE, or in any other international forum. More than 500 resolution statements and decisions supported or co-sponsored by Georgia with regard to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. I would not talk about the humanitarian assistance, and I would not talk about the number of Georgians fighting in Ukraine. A day before yesterday, we had a very tragic day when five Georgian brave men lost their life in one day. So you know, it felt like it was happening in Georgia, especially in the beginning. The situation in Georgian occupied territories, despite the withdrawal of some amount of armed forces from Georgian occupied territories to the battlefield in Ukraine, did not change the situation to the better. The tendency of kidnappings, borderization, harassment of Georgian citizens who still remain on the occupied territories remains the same. The future posture of Georgia with regard to Black Sea, you know, we've been advocating together with Ukraine the importance of the Black Sea region for many years now already. So I imagine it will only strengthen. Our European and Euro-Atlantic integration is becoming more relevant than ever before. You know that European Union made a decision to grant a European perspective to Georgia, which is a dramatic shift, probably you would agree, dramatic shift with regard to enlargement policy in the European Union. The NATO, as I said, NATO engagement in the region is quite active, and relevance of security guarantees for Georgia is becoming more relevant than ever before. Having a security umbrella has always been our top priority, but in a current situation where unpredictability only increases in our region, our NATO membership becomes even more important. We see NATO's growing engagement in the region. The very promising foreign ministerial took place in Bucharest just last week, where Georgia's and Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations were once again reconfirmed, which was important, I think. At the same time, we got a very significant, very important signal that the support to the nations and countries which are under the threat will only increase. So again, I may sound a bit optimistic today, but I think we are moving to the right direction. Georgia will be always advocating more EU and NATO engagement in the Black Sea region. And as I've said in opening remarks, we need more flexibility there, more creativity to go beyond existing limitations or strategies. Black Sea is a European sea, and without secure Black Sea, there will be no peace and security in Europe. Hopefully, I answered your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tornike. And again, I mean, you've dropped hints that we do need a more holistic approach, of course, to transatlantic security, you know, which doesn't always just involve a military response as such, but also be ready for Russia to churn out more disinformation as they've done in the past. We need to focus on our infrastructure also. I know Georgia's Unclear deep sea port project is really important, and we need to think about how the 3 Seas initiative can be harnessed in support of those initiatives. Let's turn back to Andriy. I'm going to ask you to look a little bit into the crystal ball, which of course is really important, but also a difficult exercise. Now, Andriy, annexing Crimea has been an integral part to Russia's Black Sea strategy. Can you provide us with a few scenarios ranging from Ukraine taking back control of the Crimean Peninsula to Russia maintaining it for some time to come, and explore what those scenarios would mean for Black Sea security? Thank you.
Thank you. So generally, any scenario where Russia keeps its imperial strategy is quite negative for Black Sea security and generally for regional security. And Crimea is just a part of this overall picture. Obviously, it's important. It's a massive base, naval and land and air force in the region. Obviously, some maritime strategies called it unsinkable air carrier. From the perspective of projecting power. So obviously, if Russia controls, controls the Black Sea, controls the Crimea, that means that it essentially controls the Black Sea in whatever way it wants. And we need to understand that it's now the whole war, which started on 24th of February, is now bigger than Crimea. It's bigger than Russia. It's bigger than Black Sea. It's about whether the international world order actually means anything, and whether it has a chance to exist or not. Because if such conflicts with such degree of cruelty, destruction, and human rights abuse, and all these sort of negative things, which we know about that, which you know about that from the news, and we know because we live and work here in Ukraine. If that does not end with the end of the Russian government as we know it, so if such conflict does not end with the end of Putin's regime, and Putin still retains the power and it still projects its imperial ambitions further on, that would probably mean that that the world is much more dangerous place than even the whole Black Sea security. So it means that we are on the edge of something of a completely new security era for the world. So we need to analyze all the sort of omissions and all the kind of strategic mistakes of the past, and not to repeat them in the future. And that's the main thing. So the precedent has to be constructive, not sort of destructive. And of course, Russia will be doing whatever possible to retain the control over the Crimea and the Black Sea. And yes, there are a lot of hesitations and there are a lot of questions of how to approach the Crimean question, basically, at the end of the war. And I would say that it is a bit irrelevant to say that, well, perhaps, for example, we can squeeze Russia out of the Ukraine, but maybe Crimea could be something special. This is not the situation when we have to trade and negotiate about the whether some piece of land can be kept in aggressor's hands or it cannot be, because this war is not about territory. It's not about like a territorial war. It's a war of the country which decided to destroy the world order. It decided to expand its imperial ambitions to the region, and regardless of whatever international law says and everybody else say, they kind of breach every imaginable rule of cohabitation between the nations in order to attain their goals. So in this case, we have to say that it's slightly irrelevant to even argue whether at the end of this war Putin has to keep something. I think the amount of the crimes which they committed already is precluding any sort of any kind of a normal end of this for him. So the only question is how physically, what is the modality of restoring the global order in that place. And I think, again, as we discussed before, I don't think that restoring of modality is in any case includes Mr. Putin being in the power, because I don't think he's capable of any constructive dialogue anymore. And I don't think he was capable before, but regardless, at the moment he isn't. So I think that we should keep pushing and keep pushing in diplomatic, the economic sanctions in whatever ways for Russia to fail with this war, and then Crimea becomes one of the topics. But I don't think that any kind of a compromises will get us anywhere at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, and that of course has major implications also on the issue of negotiations also going forward, and in terms of how you define your objectives, which is very important.
If you don't mind me, let me just say
Sure.
one sentence about this. Negotiated way out of any conflict is, of course, the best result, because it sort of ends up the war. It may save lots of human lives, etc., etc. But we need to be realistic who we have negotiations with. So, of course, if we can come up with some kind of a peace, it's great. But we don't think it's even realistic even to start negotiations with Putin's government, because the only way they use that period of time is to reinforce their positions and basically get there some kind of operational pause. I don't think, and we have zero indications that their strategies have changed for a second, and we have zero indications that it can change. I think they're already like in a state there where they're not changeable. So I realistically don't think that real proper negotiations are possible with Russia when it's run by this regime. So as soon as it changes, of course, we're happy to talk to Russians. Yeah, so it's not about like, are we against negotiations or we're for negotiations? It's the question, do we see that person as capable to do any agreements and capable, in contract law, there is an expression called contract capacity to contract. We don't think that person has any capacity for to enter into a proper agreement. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. No, my interest, of course, is in conflict resolution, so I find that very interesting. Tania, we're going to turn to you again. I know you're limited with time also, but I want to ask you, what is the importance of the EU and NATO working closely with non-member states like Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova? Because you mentioned partnerships earlier and the importance of that. And ideally, how should those relations be cultivated in a manner that would help to beef up Black Sea security? Thank you, Tania.
Indeed, thanks a lot. It's an absolutely crucial question. Of course, I mean, what is the importance? Of course, the importance is absolutely huge. On the EU side, these partnerships with Ukraine before, but also Georgia and very much Moldova as well, were already standing, I think, on a very solid foundation, very much integrating in different aspects of the huge European family and the different policies that comes with. And this is very much deepened, I think, step by step, including through, as it was mentioned, through the European Union perspective and respective candidate status that was offered. Can't emphasize enough how much of a milestone this is and how much celebration there was, at least in where I sit in the diplomatic service. So that's really seen as a great achievement. And also, it's important to keep in mind that when we discuss about the EU's what we call common security and defense policy, partnerships are a key tenet of that policy, and it's been so ever since its creation. It's very clear that without partners, without friends, the European Union cannot be a credible international security provider, and it's very much a win-win type of relationship. So now there's this whole reflection of how the EU can think more strategically about its partnerships on the one hand, and on the other hand, how it can give more to its partners, more from what they want. So how to tailor these partnerships to these partners' needs. And this is very much happening when it comes to Ukraine. So we have, you probably know, a military assistance mission in support of Ukraine, training Ukrainian armed forces on EU soil. This is very much tailored to Ukrainian needs. This was based on what Ukraine told us they need from us, and this is what we have delivered. Now, so each of these countries, I think, have made a very clear and loud choice, and I think they've taken a very strong political stance, and a very risky one even for themselves, for their societies, when they said very loudly that they belong in the EU family. Each of these countries have been, in a way, bearing the brunt of that when it comes to their bigger belligerent neighbor. And this is a very, very crucial political call that they made, that, as I said, comes with a lot of responsibility, which we on our side have to treasure, that we have to respect, and we have to reward it. And I think this is what we're trying very much to do. And the cooperation, the partnership with each of these countries is, I think, very visible from the political level to the very practical level. Just to give you some examples, we have an EU monitoring mission in Georgia. This is a monitoring mission that is patrolling the areas close to Abkhazia and South Ossetia to ensure that basically there's no return to hostilities. Now we are doing the same further in the South Caucasus, in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, Armenia, Azerbaijan. So again, there's a lot of attention now on making these engagements more effective and more tailored to what these partners need. And it's also a testament that the EU cares about the region, and the EU is there to invest in there. And not only on the economic side and development side, which was there for a very long time, but now very much focused on the security and military side of things. This is also visible through the military support that the EU has provided. When I say the EU now, I refer to EU institutions, to EU pots of money like this European Peace Facility, which now we're putting even more money into, precisely to be able to support partners even more. You mentioned Moldova as well. We have an existing civilian mission in Moldova, and now we're planning even more engagements on the more military side of things, possibly. So there's a lot of thinking going on for the region, not only when it comes to the military side, but also, again, I come back to the resilience, right? When I mentioned the Black Sea, the way we see it is also very much from the resilience lens. Hybrid threats, cyber, democratic resilience, how you need strong institutions and strong societies to withstand interference. This is very much a focus of the EU's engagement. We have something called permanent structured cooperation. This is a very useful partnership tool when it comes to developing defense capabilities. There's also strong economic support, financial support, energy support. This is very clear in Moldova's case, for example, transport and connectivity support. And lastly, of course, there's also very important political and diplomatic support. I mentioned already when you asked me about Romania, the role in putting these countries and the challenges of the region high on the agenda. It's very high on the agenda at the moment, and that's very good, and it brings results. For instance, one of my bosses, the Deputy Secretary General for Common Security and Defense Policy, he's going to visit Georgia next week. I mean, the Deputy Foreign Minister and Deputy Defense Minister of Georgia will also be in Brussels. So these are very important diplomatic signals, and these are there. They will increase. Not only they're there to stay, but they will increase, and the EU will continue to stand with Ukraine and support it in winning this war the way it wants to win its war, and of course to support Georgia and to support Moldova as well in these critical times. It's also very much because we treasure these partnerships, but it's for European security at large. This is not lost on anyone. And let me also add that for us, I think this is very much a test of credibility as well. And we are very determined, I see from our side, to demonstrate to our friends and to our partners that we are there basically in solidarity. And solidarity is also measured in practical terms as well. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Tania, and thank you for mentioning a number of concrete ways in which the EU is expanding some of these partnerships with a range of actors in the Black Sea region, and we hope, of course, to see more, especially now that Ukraine, has attained candidate status, of course, also. And Tania, feel free to drop off if need be. I know you mentioned that you are short on time. Let's go to Tornike again. You've heard what Tania said in terms of the EU's approach. How does Georgia seek to overcome its sea blindness? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I guess you mentioned the limited naval capabilities which Georgia has. Depressing formulation, sea blindness, but I can understand where it comes from. As you know, as a result of 2008 war, we lost most of our navy, and the decision was taken to abolish navy within the armed forces and to reinforce the Coast Guard, because with a limited budget capabilities, having two naval agencies was costly and is costly, as you understand. And since then, we've been trying to develop our Coast Guard as much as possible to make sure that it has the capacity to undertake the function of main naval authority of Georgia. And we are making some progress in that regard. I guess I can share with you, for example, one detail that two Georgian boarding teams have currently completed the NATO OCC process and have been positively evaluated, which means that they will become part of the NATO operation in the Mediterranean, and they will be most probably dispatched on one of the NATO ships as part of the Operation Sea Guardian. So we are trying to improve our capabilities. You know that there are a number of countries who are investing a lot in Georgia's Coast Guard capabilities. Probably United States is number one. And a couple of years ago, we received 2 additional vessels from US side. We are working on a number of projects to make sure that those vessels are also NATO interoperable. As you know, as a result of number of NATO decisions, there is a substantial NATO-Georgia package and ongoing assistance project conducted by NATO in Georgia. And under the SNGP, the naval component is very strong. It is priority both for Georgia and for allies. Our expectation is that it's a long-term project. It's a multi-year project, which includes strengthening Georgia's maritime awareness. And I'm confident that as a result of that project successfully implemented, Georgia will significantly improve its both its naval capabilities and its maritime awareness, situational awareness on the Black Sea. It is very clear that when the war is over, or when the war is won, we will have to start thinking about the new security arrangements, including for the Black Sea. And in that context, we have to think how countries with limited capability. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My
Yes.
apologies. My internet connection is not very good at present. Thank you. I think I heard what you say. I'm not sure whether you finished there, so my apologies for that. My internet connection dropped. Did you finish your point, Tornike?
Yeah, almost. Well, what I was saying is that once we go to a point when we can talk about the new security arrangement, new security architecture in the on the Black Sea, I think Georgia will be in a position to contribute to it, to be a significant factor in this, with its just strategically important location and with improved capabilities, including in the maritime awareness and naval capability in general.
Thank you for that response. Also, I think I heard most of it, and you made a few interesting points. Let's hope that we can work more closely together on taking advantage of this crisis, also to make changes that have been long due, as you've mentioned during the beginning of this discussion. Also, all the signs have been there in terms of what was going to happen, but we've been ignoring these things. Andriy, I'm going to ask you to sort of just kind of close us off. I know that Ukraine is moving into a really critical stage at present, as we are in winter. So feel free to respond to this in any way possible. But what's your key message to the international community? What are the key things that Ukraine desperately needs at present? What's your message? Thank you, Andriy. Andriy, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, missed it. The message is exactly the same, because we're talking about the weapons. We're talking about the support in our fight for Ukraine, in our fight for the victory, and the exact the exact types of equipment and what exactly we need has been communicated since for several months, and it's more or less still the same. What we see sometimes in the Western community is the what we call the war fatigue, which is obvious, as it takes so long and it's so intense. But I can tell you that the most people who are tired of the war and who wants the war to end are Ukrainians, and the reason we still fighting for the for the freedom and is because a military victory is currently the only way to end this war. So because we simply don't have a choice, we don't have a plan B, and so we are pursuing with the only option we've got, and that's why what we need is the world, particularly the democratic community, to trust that we're doing everything we can and support us on the way through. Also, obviously, it is important to understand the the strategic implications of what's going on and how it ends and how the world will be after this war, because as I said before, this war shapes the future of the world to a great extent. And if we make right conclusions, if we make right steps, if we make correct strategic choices, and that includes the Black Sea region, it includes the Black Sea as a whole, it includes strategic weapons, it includes the nuclear stability and all other dimensions of the today's security environment. So the way we make these choices basically determines how our children will be living and the grandchildren and the other generations for some time in the future. For example, we can look at Russian nuclear threats all the time and the way that they are continuously threatened to use the weapons. If we, for example, makes any decisions under those threats, we will see a massive proliferation around the world. We will see a massive spread of the nuclear weapons around the world, because that will mean that whatever is your position in the battlefield, however you're losing with the conventional weapons, if you have nuclear weapons, you can have some sort of a magic key and basically get whatever you like from the international community. And that will mean that everybody will want ones. And that will mean that everybody will try to, and many other countries will try to get nuclear weapons in their arsenal. And maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, the world will never be the same. Because then we will have, after a massive wave of proliferation of the nuclear weapons around the world, we will have like tens of countries owning this. And then who knows, maybe the nuclear wars will actually become a reality. And we don't obviously want that. We want to avoid that. So that's why we need to think about the strategic implications of our choices. And it's being decided right now, and it's decided by the whole world. So that's why we want the democratic Western community, all democratic communities, all free countries communities, to be with us and to support, because we are defining the future here together. Thank you.
Thank you, Andriy, and apologies again. I can't be on camera at present due to my technical issues. But yes, your message is extremely important. We of course understand the importance of this conflict to Ukraine, but also to Russia, which is why we initiated this dialogue series in the beginning of March. I would like to thank all of our panelists, Andriy, Tania, Tornike, for your time and for sharing your expertise with us. All three of you have reinforced the message that we need to carefully consider the importance of Black Sea security, as it is inseparable from overall transatlantic security. I'd also like to thank our audience for tuning in. This is our last Russia-Ukraine dialogue for 2022, but we will continue our series in January. So please be on the lookout for future events. At LSE IDEAS, we're determined to continue to draw attention to Putin's aggression in Ukraine and consequences. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.